Hi, my name is Ferguson Earnshaw. I'm the Director of Corporate Practice and Compliance here at Apex currently. I'm also the director that currently handles the experience review results process. So I'm just going to take you through a few steps towards becoming a professional member. As you know, you need three things beyond your academics to become a professional member. The first is experience reporting. Okay, so you need to have some experience and you need to report it to the association. The second is good character, which I've previously spoken in another short presentation about, as well as you also need to complete the professional practice exam. Once you're done that, you can complete your professional member application and apply to become a member. Additionally, at that time, you'll be asked for some references. So the big thing I'm here to talk to you about is work experience reporting, specifically work experience reporting through the competency-based assessment system. So we've had the competency-based assessment system for a couple of years now, so this presentation is not going to cover experience reporting in the old legacy paper-based system. If you have questions on that, you would currently have to have previously submitted a paper report, and if you have done that, you can email experiencereview at apex.ca. That's experience-review at apex.ca, and the staff would be more than happy to answer your question about your application that's already in process. So who does the competency-based assessment system apply to? First of all, it applies to engineers in training who've submitted their first work experience report after January 1st, 2019. Engineers in training who elect to change reporting into the new online system, so if somebody was in the previous reporting system, they can elect to change. Professional members validating experience reports for engineers in training and geoscientists in training in the CBA system, as well as internationally educated engineering applicants who've been assigned work experience reporting to wait for confirmatory exams after January 1st, 2019. It also applies to geoscientists in training who have submitted their first work experience report after January 1st, 2021. Geoscientists in training who have elected to change into the new online reporting system. Professional members validating experience for geoscientists in training who are submitting in that system, as well as any internationally educated geoscience applicants who are submitting work experience to waive confirmatory exams after January 1st, 2021. The Experience Review Committee is the committee that evaluates work experience. So experience is demonstrated through work experience reporting, and the work experience report review activity is delegated to the Experience Review Committee by Council. The ERC uses a peer review process to assess experience against the definitions of the practice of professional engineering and professional geoscience from the Engineering and Geoscience Professions Act. Experience reporting requirements. Prior to being granted a license, you must demonstrate the ability to practice engineering and geoscience. The onus is on you, the member or applicant, to provide evidence that you possess the experience or the capability to practice engineering and geoscience at a professional level. Canadian experience must be supervised by a professional engineer or professional geoscientist, and international experience must be supervised by someone who is recognized as an engineer or a geoscientist in the country where the work is performed. If in doubt, please contact us at APEX and ask for guidance on who should validate your experience. Okay, so when we're doing work experience through the CBA system, the first thing we want to do, the first step, step one, is to read through the competency assessment guide and other CBA documents. Now, 9 times out of 10, the questions that we receive, it's clear that the applicant did not read the material. And I have to say that if you simply read the material, you're going to be able to ask intelligent questions about your work experience and how you should report it, and I think that that is definitely in your best interest. So read through that material. That material is found on the APEGS website, and it is under Work Experience Reporting, and either Work Experience Reporting Engineering or Geoscience, and you're looking for the Competency Assessment Guide, which is updated regularly, as well as the competency-based assessment supplementary materials. So there's a questions and answers document, sample applicant process, sample submission documents. Okay. Step 2, you're going to go and register for an account. So go to competencyassessment.ca and register for an account. This is because all that reporting is done using an online reporting tool. So you go to that website and register for that account, select from the main page the link for applicants, then follow the prompts to create a new account. For the jurisdiction, you're going to choose the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of Saskatchewan. You're not going to be able to change this later, and if you select the wrong regulator and enter your information, Saskatchewan cannot gain access to it, so you need to make sure you select that correctly. You may see information that says things about Engineers and Geoscientists BC or Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of BC. That is because they're the host of the system, so you may see that on occasion. It is totally normal to see that. Here's a look at the main page where you're going to register for that user account. You see that applicant section there for registering. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to log into your new account and report your work experience. Now, this is probably going to take you a little while because you're going to have to go through your submission. I don't imagine that you would do it in one slog. There's quite a lot of material to get through. So in that system, work experience is reported as a series of competencies. Now, competencies are meant to be observable and measurable skills that you can show, knowledge, abilities that you can show that you have, some traits or motivations required for professional registration. And they're demonstrated through our actions and through our behaviors. Okay, so the first thing when you're going to go in to report those competencies, you want to go from your resume and you want to enter in your employment history. Specifically, I want to make this clear. You are entering positions where you have served as an engineer or a geoscientist, okay? We don't care about your part-time jobs that are not related to the practice of engineering or geoscience, or also in jobs where you are not practicing, say you had an alternative position as a manager in a non-geoscientist or engineering capacity. That's not relevant to this. You don't need to show that in your employment history. Now, this is used to assess the length of time of practice, and we're looking for a minimum of 4 years. It also serves as a reference for the reported competencies so that people can see where they occur in your career from the timeline. You can also use your continuing professional development logs to fill in the CPD competencies if you're a professional engineer where you're reporting that in category 7. Now, my writing tips for you is choose your best examples. Now, by best examples, I want to go out here and I want to just tell you this is relevant to you. A best example may be your most senior work. It may be a particularly challenging project. It may be something that you did that was very unique, but it could also be an example where you have easy access to a validator. We do appreciate that international applicants, you're from a different place where your validators may not have the same expectation in participating in this process, and you may want to choose an example from someplace where you have access to a validator who's cooperative in the process. So the best example is relevant to you and your judgment. The next thing you want to do is you want to write in the first person. It's important to demonstrate the work that you have done. Use I statements. I calculated, I measured, I designed, I analyzed. If you don't do this, it can be confusing what your role in the project was, specifically if you've indicated a level of project management or something like that, you want to specifically talk about your contributions. You want to write about specific projects with specific examples, and you don't want to describe general projects or general work. So if you're just discussing the general topic of commissioning something, you want to talk about a specific instance where you've commissioned something. Like, for example, if you commissioned a new oil recovery system or something like that. You would want to discuss that. So you want to include reference to the theory and technical concepts. You don't need to include calculations, just a reference to what was calculated and how it was calculated, and even why there, so that people can see the actual act of engineering in your work. Now for the engineers in training and the engineers who are applying, Canadian environment competencies became a requirement as of January 1st, 2020. So that means all members and applicants are required to obtain category minimum average ratings on competencies 1.1, 1.6, 1.9, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 5.1, and 6.2 in a Canadian or equivalent to Canadian environment setting. So this includes competencies that need to be resubmitted that were submitted for validation on or after January 1st. So you do have to make that on your resubmissions as well after that date. Okay. Unlike the paper-based reports, the CBA system uses a rating scale for experience, and it's really helpful to help you get the feedback you need. Members and applicants and validators and supervisors and the assessors are all asked to rate the competency. Before you can submit a competency, you need to rate it. Okay, the rating system is published in the guide, and here's just a slide that shows you. It is a 0 to 5 rating system. Okay, a 0 is little or no exposure. It's possible if you're receiving a 0 or a 1 that you don't actually understand what was asked, or your submission doesn't show that you understand what was asked. Generally, with a level of understanding, you would probably be expecting a 2 or a 3. Okay, now a 3 is what is generally required on most of the competencies for professional registration. When we start to get into the 4s and 5s, 4s is a very senior engineer, and a 5 is most likely somebody with 20 plus years experience, possibly PhDs, leading the research in the area. It's a very mature rating. Now I can tell you from the number of assessments I've looked at, and I've looked at every assessment that has gone through the system, people that consistently rate themselves as a 5 generally do poorly in the process because they may not have an accurate assessment of their own abilities. You should be very self-reflective when you do this activity and try and accurately rate yourself. This is even, going through that when you accurately rate yourself, your supervisor is more than likely to agree with you if you're self-reflective in this process versus just all 5s, because then the supervisor may say when they're rating it, I don't believe they have this level, I believe it's at a lower level, and that's just a comment you just don't want to see. And the supervisor is just being honest, saying that this was a junior task or this was an intermediate task or how it was performed. Okay. After you rate your competency, your validator is going to rate it. Now, the validator is someone who has direct knowledge of the work performed. So they should have first-hand knowledge, meaning they know about the work and they've seen how it was performed on some scale. Now, in the previous system, it would be a supervisor. In this system, a validator could be many people. It could be a supervisor once again, but it could also be a colleague or a coworker that was involved in the process or project and knows what you personally did, or it could be a client. It could also be a manager that's in charge of the supervisor. Now, the validator's role is to confirm the work experience information which they have personal knowledge. So they have to have knowledge of the work to perform to do that. They're going to provide that competency level score for the key competencies that they've been assigned. Okay. And they're going to provide some feedback there regarding your readiness for professional registration. So they're going to provide feedback on the competency and feedback on your general readiness for practice. Okay, so the next, so your validator requirements here. In the total application, you need 4 validators, 2 of which must be PEngs or PGOs or engineering or geoscience licensees or equivalent. Okay, so what is equivalent? Very common question. Generally, PEs are considered to be equivalent from the United States. Validators are normally supervisors, but may also be employers, colleagues, clients who have that knowledge. Okay, at least one validator must be a direct supervisor and share your discipline of practice. So if you're practicing structural engineering, you need a supervisor who's practicing structural engineering to validate for you. If the validator is not your supervisor, you require permission from APEGs. Okay, so if you're providing a validator that is not your supervisor, you need to contact APEGs and obtain permission. A single validator may validate all the competencies prepared by you. Okay, a validator may not be called on to validate any competencies, instead serve as a professional reference. So you would have 4 validators that all have knowledge of your work, but only one of them has validated competencies. Now, this is important because we get questions about this, about mentors. The CBA system does not have mentors, and APEGS does not provide mentors for the CBA system. We do not have such an arrangement because we have that validator relationship where it doesn't have to be your supervisor. It just has to be somebody who is a professional, it just has to be somebody who has that knowledge. And you note that only 2 of the 4 have to be professional members. Okay, so it is possible to have a supervisor who is not a professional engineer validate competencies for you. Okay, it is. Okay, but as we say there, you do need to have a supervisor that shares your area of practice in there too. Okay, now if you have someone who is serving as a validator, that person is notified by email that they've been assigned as a validator. The email includes a unique link to log in, and the validator may decline the process if they are unable to serve as a validator. If the person declines to serve as a validator, a reason has to be given. For example, if somebody didn't have first-hand knowledge of the work described, they should decline serving as a validator. And this has happened before. We've seen validators saying, this really wasn't my employee and I didn't really know their work and I don't feel comfortable evaluating their work. So the reasons for that the validator declines are confidential, so we can't disclose them with an applicant or a member. We just say that they have declined, please find another one. Okay, when the person serving as a validator, they review each competencies that they're assigned, and they provide the rating as well as feedback regarding the performance on the work described. The system allows for feedback between the validator and the member or applicant, should changes be required prior to validation. So, if they say, I've looked at this and I'm not comfortable because I don't feel that you've accurately described your work, or this work that you've portion of your application was performed by another member of our team, and I'd like you to remove it from there because it's kind of like you're taking credit for someone else's work. You can go back and revise your language to help make sure that you have a good submission. On the final submission, all validators provide feedback on the member's application overall readiness for professional practice. So by final submission, what I mean is there is a form at the end of the submission that is included for the reviewers that has all that feedback for them. Okay. When all the competencies are complete and validated by the validators, Apex is automatically notified. So once you've submitted everything for validation, once they've done, it notifies their Apex. It goes into a queue to be reviewed. Apex assigns assessors and a peer review is conducted. Okay, the assessors rate each competency and provide feedback to the member applicant or applicant. If the category rating are not all at or above the minimum category average, if the category averages are all above that required minimum and you've failed no competencies, you can proceed to professional licensure. Okay, if an assessor rates one or more competencies below one, or the category average is below the minimum requirement, you may be required to resubmit one or more competencies. The assessor's feedback is provided to you on any competencies rated below the minimum average, and you may rewrite the failed competencies or submit new examples of those. Now, we give you all of the competencies that you could improve on to help you maximize your chance of being accepted. Now, resubmissions are submitted using the same steps as your initial submission. There are just generally less competencies on that submission. Now, I get this question a lot. Okay, what is equivalent or to Canadian experience? Okay, because it's discussed in the documents. So US based experience, so this is experience on projects in the United States, is generally found to be equivalent. Okay, generally. That doesn't mean it's always going to be found to be equivalent, but it is evaluated generally to be equivalent, and they'll make a decision. Okay, there have been cases where it's clearly not the way something is done in Canada. Canadian companies are operating internationally but complying with Canadian code standards, regulations, and laws. Okay, so just because you work for a Canadian company internationally doesn't mean that it's going to count as equivalent Canadian experience. It has to be to the same standard of work performed in Canada. And the work described will be evaluated to see if it's that method. International standards are only relevant when they're used in Canada. So you may say, well, we use this international standard. You have to show that that standard is the same standard that's used in Canada. It is your responsibility to show the equivalency of the work performed. This is done by writing a letter explaining why the experience should be found to be equivalent. Equivalent. Now, my hint for you is you should consider addressing the Canadian environment competencies when asking for the equivalency. So there are 8 of them, and you should address why each of the 8 is equivalent, okay? Because it is possible to have some work found to be equivalent and some not. And that would reduce the amount of work you need to do to finish up your application. For example, if we worked in an environment where our primary working language was English or French, and we had reported that environment in competencies in the competencies 2.1 through 2.3, we might say the working language in this environment is English or French, which is the same language that is spoken in Canada, and you could perhaps receive an equivalency on those competencies. Okay, the following information is specific to engineering work experience, and after this I will cover geoscience work experience. Okay, experience is evaluated based on the definition of the practice of professional engineering in the Act. Okay, so here it is up on the screen. Okay, but you can look it up in the Engineering and Geoscience Professions Act if you want to reference it. So when we're creating our examples, we should be trying to tailor our examples to this definition. Okay, so for example, if we have we have a work experience that we'd like to report, and we have performed an act of planning or composing or inspecting any of those acts, we might want to mention those acts and in fact even use that language. And if we've applied engineering principles, we want to state what they are so that we can see them. And if the example covers life, health, property, economic interests, we should probably have it in there because that's the definition. And if we match that definition in our competency example, we're more likely to be successful. Okay. Now, what you need is you need 4 years of engineering work experience. Okay. You're allowed to submit 1 year of pre-graduate experience or exceptional technologist experience. So if you were a technologist before being registered as an engineer in training, you could submit a year of that time, or 1 year of pre-grad. That is an or, not both. Okay. That comes up from time to time. Pre-graduate work experience must be from after the halfway point of the bachelor's degree, and it must be supervised by a professional. Okay, there's no, it doesn't count if it wasn't supervised by a professional, period. 3 years may be a combination of international and academic experience. Okay, so uh, that means two, or sorry, 4 years may be a combination of international and academic experience. 2 years of academic experience could be 2 years for a PhD, or 1 year for a thesis-based master's, or you could combine a thesis-based master's, that's 1 year plus 1 year for a PhD. Now, I want to cover this here. Thesis-based master's means a thesis was published and an abstract is available for that thesis. This does not include Masters of Engineering projects. Okay, this is an actual thesis that's published. Okay, completion of the Canadian environment competencies. So what you have here is those competencies that we've previously cited. You need to show that they were in a Canadian or equivalent to Canadian environment and get that minimum rating. Okay. So for your process is going to go: step one, complete your 34 competencies. Step two, complete your self-assessment, assign validators to each competency, and then submit them. Submit them for validation so that they'll come into APEX's queue. Now, the engineering competency categories, there's 7 of them, 34 competencies across the whole package. Technical competencies is 10 competencies, and this is the real area where you really show off application of engineering theory, because you're talking about actual technical examples. Communications, 3 competencies. Project financial management, 5 competencies. Team effectiveness, 2 competencies. Professional accountabilities, that's ethics and professionalism, 6 competencies. Social, economic, environmental, and sustainability, 5 competencies, as well as continuing professional development, 3 competencies. So the slide has a typo. That should say 6 and then 7. Individual competencies can be found in the competency assessment guide. Okay, so there's a competency framework under Appendix E1 where you can cover those. Now, the technical competencies, I'm just going to show you a few of them here up on the screen so that you can get an idea of what kind of competencies are there. The big one I often cite when we're discussing technical competencies with people as an example is 1.1, where you're demonstrating knowledge of regulations, codes, standards, and safety. And this includes local engineering codes, okay? Procedures and practices as applicable, okay? Another one that we often talk about is 1.4, which is applying engineering knowledge to design solutions. Okay. Hey, now, keeping in mind that we had previously discussed 1.1, another one that's relevant is safety awareness. This is one of the Canadian environment competencies, so you should just be aware of that there. So this includes on-site possible safety authorization certificates as appropriate. Transfer of design intentions, understanding the concept of quality control during the design and construction process. So this is another key area to look at. Now, the engineering competencies use what is called an indicator. And an indicator is something that you can write about to show that you meet that competency. Okay, the geoscientists, if you've read the material, you would recognize an indicator as what the geoscientists call a workplace example. Okay, it's just really an area that you can write that can help guide your writing in your submission. Okay, now you only need to show one indicator when you are submitting an example. You don't want to show every indicator, it would probably confuse your example. Pick one indicator and write to that point. Okay, you don't have to use the indicators if you think you can meet the competency without them. They are just a suggestion. But they do give you some insight into what the assessors are looking for. For example, if we were an engineer and we were submitting competency 1.4, applying engineering knowledge to design solutions, the indicators are listed as preparing technical specifications, demonstrating use of theory and calculations to arrive at solutions, demonstrate the development of a unique design solution which could not be accomplished with a standard design solution. And if we were to even go look at, there are specific indicators for different types of engineering. For example, there are structural engineering indicators available. So we could choose any one of those and meet it. For example, design to account for temperature variations could be something that a structural engineer might need to do because of Canada's very unique climate. For more indicators, you can go and look at the guide. So the competency assessment guide has a series of appendices, and these appendices have different areas of indicators in there, and they are doing new indicators all the time. So recently released are the building enclosure indicators for engineering, and we have also seen there are also indicators coming out for things like software engineering. So writing a competency uses the problem action outcome method, or that's problem solution result. Now, I've been using this same method to recommend to engineers on the legacy paper-based system, and I found that most of them have been very successful. So the first thing is you clearly want to state the problem, okay, and then you want to state what you did, your action, okay, and then you want to explain what happened, what the result was, okay. For example, you could use that to write a structural engineering example for identifying and accommodating site-specific logistical issues in design and construction plans. For example, here's that example. Okay, for the new car dealership project, I reviewed the drawing package, the service bay specified using slab-on-grade construction. I computed the cost of constructing slab-on-grade and slab-on-deck methods. I determined that slab-on-deck was cheaper, and I designed a replacement and computed the new structural properties of my proposed replacement, and found that it would be equivalent. My proposal was reviewed and accepted by the structural engineer of record, and was constructed to my design specifications. There's an example of situation, action, outcome, problem, solution, result. Okay, so one thing I want to note here is that not all of the minimum averages that the categories need are the same. Specifically, project and financial management and social, economic, and environmental sustainability. You're only looking for a 2 here. On all the other categories, you're looking for a 3 average overall, okay, to be successful. Now let's talk about geoscience. So geoscience is new, and we haven't seen as many submissions as we have with engineering, but we are starting to get some. Just as with the engineers, geoscience is evaluated using the definition from the Act. And once again, there are things defined here. So we're talking about certain group of activities, right? We've got that acquiring or processing data, advising, evaluating, examining, right? And we've got principles. They've actually outlined them here of geology, geophysics, and geochemistry. So if you're doing it, you should probably show you're doing that activity, and you should probably show you're using that knowledge, those principles. Additionally, it discusses the areas that you might be using these skills on. Okay, so you should write to that.